Of course, it's a very special moment as she received a Doctor honoris causa from our university 10 years ago. And so we are very happy and very lucky to have you back in Louvain-la-Neuve and in UC Louvain. Really for us it means a lot, all the work you do to defend women's rights, the hope you still have despite the fact that it's never moving as quick as we want, and the enthusiasm you are still giving to this very important fight is really going very well along with the values we want to defend in Louvain-la-Neuve and in UC Louvain, and the fact that we are more and more involved in this question of equity, diversity, and mainly inclusion. It's not only a problem of justice or equity, it's really how we can have a society that really includes everyone, whatever the gender, whatever the nationality, whatever the beliefs. So for us, it's really a pleasure, an honor to have you here. We are very much looking to your talk. I know we will discuss a little bit your background and everything you did, but really thank you. We know you are less traveling than before, so we know the honor you do at UC Louvain to be here today, and be sure we are very grateful for that. Thank you for being there.
Je vais profiter de cette opportunité pour d'abord vous accueillir et vous remercier d'être là. Faire face, reckoning, ce serait un peu le titre de ma présentation. Il y a 10 ans déjà, celle qui s'appelait Eve Ensler recevait un DHC dans notre université sous le thème « Écrire, faire face ». C'est pour ça qu'il me semble très intéressant de souligner que son dernier ouvrage, qui s'intitule en anglais « Reckoning », a été traduit en français précisément par « faire face ». Un thème qui lui est cher, car le silence et le secret, mais aussi les euphémisations ou les outrances, créent des relations tordues et des trahisons. Le sous-titre, c'est « Une vie de passion et de lutte ». Faire face à la violence et oser la dénoncer en prononçant les mots justes, tel est l'objectif de celle qui s'appelle désormais Vie. Depuis qu'elle a écrit Les monologues du vagin en 1998, elle a en effet changé de nom et je vais vous expliquer pourquoi. Vie bouscule par sa liberté d'expression et son audace lorsqu'elle donne une existence toute neuve à ces réalités de l'ombre. En tant que dramaturge et pionnière du féminisme, elle écrit alors le sexe féminin et permet aux femmes qui l'entendent d'en parler. Elle bouscule par l'écriture afin de combattre l'inhumain, l'insupportable et l'intolérable, le viol des femmes et des petites filles, le viol comme arme de guerre et comme dévastation sociale. Citons son ouvrage qui fait résonner toutes les formes de violence, qui s'intitule en français « Dans le corps du monde » et qui rencontre aussi les violences du colonialisme et les violences à l'égard de la terre. Elle ose un franc-parler libérateur et elle entend aborder des questions souvent occultées où se cache la domination sous toutes ses formes. Elle refuse que nos existences soient étouffées à force d'être dites à moitié. Elle démasque les faux-semblants sécuritaires qui nous entravent. Et face à ces violences, elle nous invite à ne pas avoir peur. Je voudrais faire référence à son ouvrage qui s'intitule « Enfin insécurisé ». Aussi met-elle son corps et les corps en scène, et plutôt que de les regarder, elle les entend, elle les libère. Dans son ouvrage « Encore parfait », elle s'insurge en effet contre le capitalisme scopique qui voit et regarde à distance les corps, qui les veut parfaits, qui les maquille, qui les met en forme. Et c'est pour cette raison qu'elle a proposé la danse que nous avons dansée à 18h30. Mais, et c'est là l'essentiel, elle n'en reste pas à la dénonciation et à la révolte contre la violence. Elle répond avec une proposition qui consiste à revenir aux émotions qui nous en protègent. Dans son ouvrage « Je suis une créature émotionnelle », elle lutte contre la déchirure entre le corps et l'esprit que provoque le viol. Elle nous invite à danser ensemble et c'est pour cette raison qu'elle a créé One Billion Rising en 2012. Elle a créé aussi le mouvement Vidé et elle fonde la Cité de la Joie à Panzi, près de Bukavu, dans l'est du Congo, pour rendre une vie sociale aux femmes qui ont été violées. Elle crée avec le docteur Mukwege, mais surtout avec Christine de Schrijver, qui nous fait le plaisir d'être là aujourd'hui et qui est tous les jours à la Cité de la Joie. Merci Christine d'être là. Et Christine est là au quotidien à la Cité de la Joie, et peut-être que tu pourras en dire un mot si tu veux tout à l'heure. C'est une héroïne au quotidien sur laquelle vie peut compter tous les jours. Mama Christine. Et surtout en ces temps si éprouvés de guerre au Congo. Transformer la souffrance en pouvoir, c'est donc l'objectif, aussi bien dans la Cité de la Joie que dans le quotidien et les écrits de vie. Et donc, avant de vous céder la parole, je voudrais encore parler d'un petit livre qui est d'une beauté et d'une profondeur bouleversante, Pardon, qui est un livre dans lequel vous donnez votre plume à votre père décédé pour qu'il puisse vous écrire la lettre d'excuse que vous auriez tellement voulu recevoir de sa part de son vivant. Et donc, vous avez réussi cette performance incroyable de faire preuve de suffisamment d'amour et de générosité pour comprendre comment il aurait pu écrire cette lettre. Et vous avez réussi à aller dans ce que j'ai envie d'appeler le travail des entrailles de la générosité pour aller jusqu'à ce moment de pardon. C'est sans doute une thèse que vous allez nous proposer. Comment peut-on sortir du patriarcat en essayant de cultiver cette culture du pardon? Mais je vais vous laisser tout de suite la parole pour une conférence que vous avez intitulée « Feminism, Fascism and Freedom ». Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup, Nathalie. Bonsoir. Je m'excuse de ne pas parler français ce soir. Peut-être la prochaine fois. I'm very, very moved to be here tonight with all of you and to see so many old friends and activists and sisters. And I just want to say about my friend, my sister, my heart, Christine Schuler-de Schrijver. She is my hero. She is doing unbelievable work in the Congo. She's been under siege since February with the war again, and she has managed to somehow keep City of Joy open, even in the face of all it, and keep all of our girls safe. So I just want to take a moment. You know, Congo doesn't make the news. We don't see what's happening there, but terrible things are happening there. And in a large part because of us in the West, because of our cell phones and our computers. It's a war, economic war of extraction, and it's really being played out on the bodies of women, Congolese women. And I just want to honor my sister who has stayed there and never left the women, and dedicated her life to lifting them up and helping them change their destinies. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm so moved to be back at Louvain, particularly at this terrifying time in America of repression and censorship at colleges. And I'm so proud that this university stands as an exemplar model of excellence and freedom of speech, and is no longer collaborating with universities that accept Trump's imposed censorship. Brava, brava, that's amazing. It has been really shocking to see places like Columbia and Harvard sacrificing critical discourse and caving to political pressure. Universities are here for the exploration and sharing of multiple perspectives and notions, spaces for protest and disagreement, opportunities for developing minds and spirits to challenge the status quo, to be outraged, for example, by genocide, to learn to speak truth to power. I also want to just really commend this university and your rectrice, Françoise Smet, and really for speaking out after the Pope's visit here towards his reactionary comments to women. Can I repeat her powerful words? You see, Louvain expresses its incomprehension and disapproval of the position expressed by Pope Francis regarding the role of women In the church and in society, UC Louvain can only express its disagreement with this deterministic and reductive position. UC Louvain is an inclusive university and committed to the fight against sexist and sexual violence. It reaffirms its desire for everyone to flourish within it and society, whatever their origins, gender, or sexual orientation. It calls on the church to follow the same path without any form of discrimination. And I just hope you know the incredible impact these words had across the world. So can we just have a moment of deep appreciation for the rectrice? Thank you so much, really. This talk really began as a letter I was writing to actresses and actors, inviting them to perform in the 30th anniversary of the Broadway production of the Vagina Monologues, which is going to happen in 26. And then it became a letter to all of you. So, dear friends, sisters, colleagues, activists, survivors, in February, it will be 30 years since the first production of the Vagina Monologues. It's really hard to believe that this much time has passed. I had a secret and perhaps a naive prayer or dream that by the time I reached 70, which I did 2 years ago, this play would be irrelevant, that all women, and when I say women, I mean it inclusively and expansively, would be living in their full sexuality, without fear, without suppression, that our bodies would finally be free, that violence against women and girls and our earth would be a memory. It began with a word, vagine, vagina, vagina, vagine. Why don't we say it together, just to loosen us up? Can we all, vagine, can I hear you? I can't hear you, vagine, vagine. Okay, we've said it, now we're here. I have been saying this word over and over and over again for the last 30 years. I've been saying it in theaters, at colleges, in living rooms, in cafes, at dinner parties, on radio programs, all over the world. I eventually said it on TV in America, but at the beginning I wasn't allowed. You could say, by the way, penis on television, but you couldn't say penis. You couldn't say vagina. I said it 128 times every time I performed my show, the Vagina Monologues, which I think most of you know was an evening of fictional monologues based on interviews that I did with hundreds of women of all ages about their vaginas. I said it in my sleep. I said it because I wasn't supposed to say it. I said it because it's an invisible word that stirs up anxiety, awkwardness, contempt, and disgust. I said it because we are comfortable with words like genocide, apocalypse, nuclear war, plutonium on the front pages of newspapers, but the word vagina is scandalous. I said it because I believe that what we don't say, we don't see, acknowledge, or remember. What we don't say becomes a secret, and secrets often create shame and fear and myths. I said it because I wanted to eventually feel comfortable saying it and not ashamed and guilty, and that finally did happen. I say vagina because when I started saying it, I discovered how fragmented I was, how disconnected my mind was from my own body. My vagina was something over there, away in the distance. I rarely lived inside it or even visited. I did not see my vagina as a primary resource, a place of sustenance, humor, creativity. It was fraught and full of fear. I had been raped by my father as a little girl, and although I'd grown up and done all the adult things one does with one's vagina, I had never really re-entered that part of my body after I had been violated. I had essentially lived most of my life without my motor, my center, my second heart. I say vagina because I want people to respond, and they have. Wherever the Vagina Monologues has traveled, they have tried to censor it, the word, in ads, in major newspapers, on tickets sold in department stores, on banners that hang in front of theaters, on box office phone machines where the voice says only monologues or V monologues. Why is this, I used to ask? Vagina is not a pornographic word. It's actually a medical word, a description of a body part, like an elbow or hand or rib. It may not be pornographic, people say, but it's dirty. What if our little daughters were to hear it? What would we tell them? Well, maybe you could tell them that they have a vagina, I said. If they don't already know it, maybe you could celebrate that. But we don't call their vaginas vagina, they say. I say, well, what do you call them? Well, we call them pookie or poochie or poopy or peepee or poopaloo. The list is endless in every country. I say vagina because I've read the statistics and bad things are happening to women and their vaginas everywhere. More than 1 billion women on the planet will be raped or beaten during their lifetime. 1 billion women. I mean, I just really want us to think, what is 1 billion women? More than 230 million women have undergone female genital mutilation. I say vagina because I want these bad things to stop happening. I know they will not stop until we acknowledge that they are going on, and the only way that happens is by creating the safety for women to come forward without fear or punishment or retribution. It's scary saying the word vagina. At first, it feels like you're crashing through an invisible wall. Vagina. You feel guilty and wrong, like someone's going to strike you down. Then after you say the word the 100th or 1,000th time, it's different for each woman, it hits you that it's your word, your body, your most essential space. You realize that all the shame and embarrassment you previously felt saying the word have been a form of silencing your desire, eroding your ambition. Then you begin to say the word more and more. You say it with a kind of passion, a kind of necessity, because you sense if you stop saying it, the fear will overcome you again, and you'll fall back into an embarrassed whisper. So you say it everywhere. You bring it up in every conversation. You're excited about your vagina. You want to study it and explore it and introduce yourself to it and find out how to listen to it and give it pleasure and keep it healthy and wise and strong. You learn how to satisfy yourself, and you teach your lover how to satisfy you. You're aware of your vagina all day, wherever you are, in your car, at the supermarket, at the gym, in the office. You're aware of this precious, gorgeous part of you between your legs, and it makes you smile. It makes you proud. And as more women say it, it becomes less of a big deal to say it. It becomes part of our language, part of our lives. Our vaginas become respected, sacred. They become part of our bodies, connected to our minds, fueling our spirits. Shame leaves us and violation stops because vaginas are visible and connected to powerful, wise, vagina-talking women. So often women are trained to be passive, to be wanted rather than to fully engage with life or have agency over their own desires. Many women do not feel they have permission for their own desire, as our identities and lives are so often defined by others. As a result, our autonomy and confidence is eviscerated from a young age. We don't feel worthy of even investigating our own desires because that would mean, in a very real sense, that we have a right to be here. And we know that often when we do assert our needs or wants, when we're public about it or assertive about it, we're labeled difficult or aggressive or a bitch. So we learn how to act lost and dopey and confused. Knowing your vagina is a truly revolutionary act. You know, I was just invited to Rutgers College a couple of months ago because the majority of students, women on campus, did not know how to have an orgasm. It's 2025. And I thought to myself, how is it possible in 2025 that women don't know how to have an orgasm? Because patriarchy just keeps on coming back, right? We know that often when we do, knowing your vagina is a revolutionary act. It's tantamount to becoming the subject of your own life. It all goes back to Adam and Eve, the core patriarchal warning story that showed us when Eve was seduced by the snake, when she followed her desire, she essentially brought all kinds of suffering and horror into the world. It forever associated women's desire with sin. We will come back to that story later when we talk about reframing or retelling of narratives that have kept us stuck. Do you know where your clitoris is the same as asking, do you know where the tip of your power lies? Do you know what it feels like when it is pleasured? Have you experienced the ultimate capacity of your own body for pleasure and excitement? Do you know how far you can go? How many times you can orgasm? Have you worked to expand it? Our sexuality is our life force, the vibrational energy that lives in us, that once activated is the core of our creativity, of our resilience, of our ability to resist and connect. As I'm a survivor of childhood sexual abuse and battery, for so many years, and I think that's true for so many of us who have been abused, I lived outside my body. I left my vagina at a very young age, and because it was a site for betrayal, mishaps, violence, unwanted invasion. I had lots of sex, but I wasn't connected to my body. I was disassociated. I could not even distinguish my own desire from what the world desired for me. I didn't even think I had the right to do that. When a woman is raped and invaded against her will, that traumatic act eviscerates self-autonomy and self-regulation. It robs her of the reality of choice itself. It renders her a passive victim, serving needs of others with no understanding of what feels good or right. And that dissolution of choice is what allows patriarchy to continue unquestioned or confronted. There was one night when I was performing the Vagina Monologues on Broadway, off-Broadway, and this miracle happened. You know, I'd been doing the show every night, I've been doing the moans, I've been doing the performance. But one night, I actually slipped into my vagina. I could literally feel myself slip into my body and land in this amazing place between my legs. And I realized that up until that point, I had been living my life off the fumes, a memory of a vagina. And suddenly I had arrived in myself, fully embodied and alive. So many factors force us out of our vaginas and bodies. Violence, trauma, illness, insults, degradation, ongoing threat, neglect, and fear. When we're told as children that touching ourselves, for example, is sinful, that we're whores. When we're made to believe that the body itself is stained and something not to be trusted, that is only something to be managed and controlled. What I've learned over these many years is that the body is actually a doorway, not a container so much as a conduit. When it is clear and open and unafraid, energy, ideas, confidence flows into our brains and our spirits. Trauma, and I venture to say there are probably very few people in this room who have not been traumatized in one way or another, whether it's primary or secondary trauma. But trauma blocks the pathways, distorts and decimates energy, and keeps us caught in the past, in pain, and in self-hatred, which is the function of violence against women. It's meant to shut us down, keep us self-obsessed victims, always fighting our way out of this impossible labyrinth of guilt and chaos. It's meant to zap our vitality and trust, which is why it is the methodology that sustains patriarchy. But in spite of everything, and this is why I believe women are so amazing, we have had many victories over these last 30 years. For one thing, we can say the word vagina everywhere, and we couldn't before. And we know that when we can say something, when we give language to it, it exists. In many ways, women have moved forward. We know that. I was just sitting here tonight thinking there's a rectrice. They're running this university after 600 years. Okay, well, okay, it finally happened. Congratulations. But I think we see that women have moved into leadership positions. We've gained new rights. We have choices we've never had before. We've risen up in worldwide movements like 1 Billion Rising and Me Too that have joined us in international solidarity, knowing that violence against women is a global problem, and that international solidarity has strengthened us and given us courage to demand that it ends. We've passed laws and changed traditions, transformed our understanding of gender, liberating many and freeing us out of binaries of patriarchy. Women and gender-fluid people are writing books and TV shows, starring in films, generally opening consciousness for a new way of being in the world. a way of being that is ever evolving, becoming more self-aware, more inclusive, more inviting, more playful, no longer obedient to the rules or the structures of the father that kept a certain group on top with all the power and the rest of us below. And now, of course, there's the backlash, and we're in it. The reality is, and I was saying this today, that in spite of the massive liberation that was underway, we have never been able to dismantle the paradigm, the system of patriarchy. It has been there, hovering all around us in terror of losing its power, reorganizing itself, and devising ghastly projects like Project 2025, laws, punishments to snap us back into subservience and obedience. It was there. It was there, ignoring all the signs of climate catastrophe, hell-bent on dominating and extracting the earth, and often we know that the extraction of the earth comes with the mass raping of women, with drilling and deforestation, occupation, mining, mountaintop removal. It was there generating fascist and extreme right-wing forces, and we know that historically, fascists always insist that women's primary role is domestic and reproductive, and that sustaining fascism always involves machismo, flexing male supremacy with sustained violence, raping, battering, threatening, cutting, hurting, and controlling women's bodies. In the last few years, and now under the new terrifying US administration, there has been a serious and ruthless undermining and retrenchment of our rights and our freedoms. In some very real ways, we have less rights today than we did 30 years ago under the vagina monologues first happened. In America, we are seeing horrific bans on abortion on women's bodies. I saw a recent law in South Carolina that was so shocking, but everything is so shocking in America right now, that says if you exercise too much or if you take a plane while you're pregnant and you have a miscarriage, you can go to jail for murder. The T in LGBT has been dropped in all government documents, and the words women, female, victim, equality, sense of belonging, and trauma, all these words have been erased from the government website and are no longer allowed to be used in government documents. We see a very devious and manipulative plan underway to end the vote for close to 60 million women. And they're doing this by not allowing, if you changed your name when you got married and it's not on your birth certificate, you cannot vote if it doesn't match. So it would literally disabuse 60 million women of the vote. Patriarchy is a circulating virus. It lives dormant in the political psyche and is awakened by toxic predatory circumstances. We have a country that is now run by a convicted rapist, a liar, and a felon. He's the highly toxic byproduct of predatory, sexist, capitalist, dark energy. He's the male ego on steroids, an artificial TV entity who has come to believe a narcissistic fantasy version of himself completely unmoored from reality, a human without grace, empathy, kindness, or care. His ejaculated sense of entitlement is a cover for his astounding lack of knowledge or education. The only thing he knows, or wants, or accepts are his own desires, impulsive ideas, bizarre wishes, or idiotic opinions. He thrives on making others feel little and terrible. He's the viral load that grew out of an unprocessed history of greed and racism, colonialism, violent winning and firing, hating the poor, shaming the needy, cursing the oppressed, mocking the disabled, and criminalizing the most vulnerable. For him, the world is made of idiots and losers, and you're always on the verge of becoming a loser, ready to be tossed out like a useless sack. He's the daddy that bragged about grabbing women's pussies, the daddy found guilty by a jury of sexually abusing E.G. Carroll in a department dressing room, and was called out by his own wife for violently raping her because she accidentally reminded him who he really was. He's the gross and gooey, armed miscreant that thousands of years of malignant patriarchy vomited out. So hideous, so ghastly, he has the multitudes momentarily frozen in disbelief and horror. And he has filled his cabinet with rapists, batterers, misogynists, racists, many literally on steroids, who have legitimized and encouraged the rise of hate and violence towards all women. Just a few weeks ago, they flew Andrew Tate and his brother, accused of human trafficking and rape, on a private jet to welcome them back in the United States so they could join the 1,500 insurrectionists, many of whom are rapists, who he let out of jail on his first week in office. He is literally rounding up tortured immigrants in Guantanamo who have done nothing more than seeking asylum while he is inviting rapists into the country. This full-scale misogyny mixed with a rising Christian nationalism is focused on taking away women's power, our right to have a job and vote, make equal money for equal work. They want us back in the kitchen, here to do nothing more than spread our legs, cook, and make babies. In essence, these right-wing misogynist forces are sending us back to the Dark Ages, working hard to do that. Trump's life and work of his cabinet is dedicated to really crushing the expansion of life force, whether it's shutting down DEI or thought or firing thousands of federal workers who make our world possible, or banning books, or arresting people in the middle of the night and dragging them to unknown places on the globe. Destinations for merely speaking out against genocide or excluding any press from the White House that deems to criticize him, or eliminating benefits like Medicaid and Social Security that keep millions afloat, or punishing gender expression and expansion of joy itself. He and his billionaire partner, Elon Musk, have utterly no understanding. As a matter of fact, Elon Musk came out last week to say he believed that empathy was the downfall of Western civilization. They have no concern or respect for working people, the farmers, the teachers, the nurses, the workers, the construction workers, drivers, bookkeepers, real estate agents, postal services, secretaries, the list goes on. They don't care if their economic policies destroy the lives of working people, as their goal is basically to consolidate an oligarchy, to make more and more money for billionaires while growing a slave class to support them. And this is not just happening in America. We are seeing the rise of fascism and religious nationalism throughout the world. We're seeing it in India, in Russia, the Philippines, throughout Europe, Hungary, Turkey, Israel, France, Austria, Germany, the list goes on. We are actually witnessing on our cell phones an ongoing genocide, which we have been forced to watch and literally be party to for 1.5 years in Palestine. And we are not witnessing the ongoing genocides in Congo and Sudan, even though our cell phones are supporting that. We benefit from the theft and the plundering of minerals that belong to the indigenous people, causing the genocide in pursuit of minerals that charge our phones. It's as if we are right now experiencing what I can only call a kind of severe patriarchal outbreak, a madly spreading contagion, a pathogen of oppression and annihilation, a free-for-all attack on the bodies of women and our rights, an escalation and expansion of extreme abuses that are being frighteningly normalized. In just a matter of months, we have seen a husband, Dominique Pellicot, in France, inviting over 50 men to rape and his drug wife while he filmed it. 70,000 men gathering on Telegram to openly share techniques and methods for drugging and assaulting women. The suppression of women in Afghanistan is so severe that women are no longer allowed even to speak to each other. Iranian girls as young as 9 are being legally forced into marriage with old men, the mass targeting of girls and women in the Congo and Sudan, and I was just on a web call with activists from Sudan who were talking about the fact that the rapes are so frequent, so massive, and so ghastly that women are literally plotting their suicides in order not to face them. And naturally, our instinct is to retreat, to cower under the bed or chair, hide until all this passes. But what it feels like right now is it's different this time. It's gigantic. Life itself is at stake, the whole planet, the earth, and all her people. This is not a time for hiding. Martin Luther King once said that a man who's not willing to die for a cause is not fit to live. So I ask myself daily, and I ask you, what are we willing to die for, and what are we willing to live for? It's really the question of our times. First, I know for me, I'm willing to die and live for the earth. I know I'm only here to serve the Great Mother at this point in my life. I live in the woods. I live with the trees. I live with water. I live in the land of the land because of the land. And I know I am here to protect her and honor her, and I'm here for all women, that we may live safely and fully in our sexuality, in our bodies, with the confidence in our multiplying dreams and desires. It took every ounce of strength and fortitude I had, and I know this is true for every survivor in the world, to fight my way out of the box of rape and violence that locked up my life force and ability to think when I was a child. This vagina finally got free, and I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to be clear. No one is putting this vagina back in the bottle. So what I feel now is we go all the way, or there is no more way. We have to stand for each other, and that means we stand for everyone. No one gets left out of the story. We stand for the girls in Congo, raped and re-raped every time a new world power decides to extract more of their minerals. We stand for the beautiful people in Gaza, 50,000 of whom have died in a year and a half, who deserve, like all people, a right to their land and sovereignty and freedom from ongoing threat, apartheid, and genocide. We stand for trans teenagers who are finding their way and opening doors to a new world for all of us, the travelers who seek safety and refuge at our borders. The antidote to cruel patriarchy is a solidarity so firm, so unshakable, that we cannot be divided into hierarchies or silos. It is speaking out when it's scary to speak out, and intervening when people are mistreated. It means coming into our bodies and hearts through theater and art and poetry, painting and dancing. I want to share a quote from Toni Morrison that most of you have probably heard, but it always bears repeating. She said, "This is precisely the time when artists go to work. There's no time for despair, no place for self-pity, no need for silence, no room for fear. We speak, we write, we do language. That is how civilization heals. I know the world is bruised and bleeding, and though it is important not to ignore its pain, it is also critical to refuse to succumb to its malevolence. Like failure, chaos contains information that can lead to knowledge, even wisdom, like art." So why is art so critical at this moment? And by art, I mean that which challenges us, provokes us, makes us uncomfortable. Art that speaks of our times, that is not cowed by fear or the need to placate the tyrants and the predators. Art that's very existence forms protection for the marginalized, those who may be swept up in the streets and taken to camps, separated from their children, those who've been made invisible but have critical stories to tell, those othered and unvalued, those whose histories are constantly being erased and whose pain is the ground on which we stand. Art is here most surely to instigate awe and gratitude for our precious earth. It is here to remind us that who we are when the fascists use their powers to try and make us forget. It is a banner for our humanity. It is here to eviscerate the binary and throw us into ambiguity, paradox, wonder, mystery, and all the things we cannot control. Its job is to make us question everything, to throw us out of black and white positional reality into complexity, searching, and unknowing. Art is imagination, which is our projection into a future of our own creation. At a moment where the fascists have twisted language and have us caught in fear, imagination is that capacity which can remake the world and reclaim words. Art is memory and agitating and getting up as close to the truth as possible. But most importantly, art is here to remove the stones in the way of our feelings. Fear catches our breath. It shuts us down and it numbs us. Art is a catalyst. I would even say a trigger to bring us back to life, to remind us that we always have power if we are awake and fired up by our imaginations. Fascism really depends on loneliness, and I know that the world right now is in a very deep state of loneliness. I think after COVID, we all got very isolated and pushed back into our rooms, into our apartments, into ourselves. Hannah Arendt wrote something very brilliant about loneliness in The Origins of Totalitarianism, published in 1951. She said, what prepares men for totalitarian domination in the non-totalitarian world is the fact that loneliness, once a borderline experience usually suffered in a certain marginal social conditions like old age, has become an everyday experience. Art, particularly theater, joins us in community. We, as an audience, actually are in co-creation with artists on stage. We strangers huddled in the dark become one community in thought, in feeling, and aspiration. Art can and must raise the vibration so that we are able to plug into a higher energy and realm which supplies us with vision and energy, strength, and imagination. I want to dwell on the notion of raising the vibration, because I think what the patriarchs and fascists do is they push energy down and it becomes very, very, very low. It's full of fear and dread and doubt. Our job as activists, our job as people, our job as artists, our job as teachers is to raise the vibration in spite of it and not let us be depressed and not let us be impotent. Art refuses to cooperate, normalize brutality, rape, oppression, poverty, genocide, war, and cruelty. So now is the time for each of us to become artists. If it feels scary to produce something, go and do it. That is precisely the reason for doing it. If you think you might get caught or someone might not like you or you might get shut down, go and do it. You know, I was saying to someone today, they wanted to put out the article in Le Soir, and I said, do it after I cross the border when I get back, because who knows what's happening in America at this point. But I believe that if each of us takes the responsibility of being brave, of raising that vibration, then other people get brave in your presence. Now is the time to tell new stories and to retell and reframe patriarchal interpretations of stories in the past. So I want to go back to Eve, because Eve obviously figured very deeply in my life. It was my name before I changed it. And it was really hard to be a 6-year-old with the name Eve, right? You can imagine. First, of course, she was not only responsible for the downfall of paradise, expulsion, sin, shame, but death itself. Names like myths determine a lot. In a deep sense, I belong to that story of Adam and Eve. It was like a tectonic plate at the bedrock of my consciousness, engendering how I saw myself and how I behaved in the world. And I believe this story, consciously or unconsciously, has shaped a great deal of humanity. How many of us feel as if we are fallen women, people out of the gate, our inherent credibility or value erased upon birth? How many of us are controlled by the debilitating terror that any form of disobedience or independence will lead to social exclusion and damnation? How many of us feel cursed for our curiosity, forbidden to know what we know, living amidst a culture constantly manifesting a pathological and patronizing disdain for our instincts, delegitimizing our intuition, or belittling anything that might lead to a deeper, more embodied intelligence? The myth of Eve has served as eternal warning, an electric fence around our psyches, zapping our impulses to revolt or question. I don't know about you, but the serpent has figured highly in my life, in the form of lovers, sex, drugs, rock and roll. I think many of us have been constantly ingesting things that are stand-ins for apples, but always with a sense of being wrong. Our life force or hunger to be, our erotic impulses have been distorted through this cellular shame and distrust. Although this dominant story seems to rule our conscious life, if we stop and listen, we know there has been another story gnawing at our collective subconscious, another idea of the archetypal mythic Eve. I've read biographies of Eve and Lilith and many of the feminist reinterpretations. My thought and vision, of course, rests inside and draws strength and particulars from them. Some have seen Eve as setting off to make the world according to her own experience. Some see Eve as deeply identified with her sexuality. Others see her as more intelligent, more compelling and confident, coveting wisdom. I think it's crucial how we see Eve. She was, in Christian theology, one of the first women, the mother of life, and although she is a character in a parable, we know myths rule our existence, determine the walls and the stories we live in, and the barriers of the ones we like to construct. They become the architecture of our actions and lives. So I want to present you with another story about Eve. And all stories are stories. Eve ate the apple because, like many of us, she was trying to remember the other story, the story before the trauma of brainwashing and massacres, the story before they shoved things into our sacred holes and cut the tips of our clitorises where divinity lives, before they shaved our furry nests and choked the throat of our songs, before they called us hysterical and intense and emotional, before they beat boys for crying and wanting to wear dresses, before they stoned us for uttering the words of our mothers and drilled down into us to rob us of our most moist and fertile secrets. Before Eve was made to believe she was taken from a rib, before she was forced to be obedient, before she buried her powers to heal with touch and herbs and see the future and become one with earth, before she knew how to pleasure herself over and over forever, and men knew they were there to serve that pleasure. Because she was pleasured, they and the world were pleasured over and over forever. Before she was embarrassed by joy, before she apologized for her heart and stopped respecting the size of her brain, before she disqualified her opinions and apologized for her insatiable curiosity, before childbirth became punishment and love and service to a man became mandatory, before she swallowed her rage and choked her voice, before men established God the Father at the top, before there was a top, before the earth was treated as the wretched wild, before it was life generating life in all directions, Eve ate the apple because the trajectory of her hunger was our way back. And the apple was the fruit of memory, the medicine of recall, the aphrodisiac of original connection. Eve ate the apple to regain her powers, to know what she knew before she was held hostage in the wrong garden. The Bible tells us that God said to Adam and Eve, "You may surely eat of every tree in the garden, but the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in that day you eat it, you shall surely die." Certain scholars, such as Gordon Wasson or Carl Ruck and Clark Heinrich, have written that the mythological apple is a symbolic substitution for the ethnogenic Amanara muscara mushroom. You know the red ones with the white polka dots? When we look at an illustration, can we show the illustration? From a 13th century painting, okay, the serpent is wrapped around a mushroom, right? A mushroom stalk. The serpent, who was Eve's, undeniably the tree of knowledge, is pictured this way. The serpent, who was Eve's inner, deeper knowing, said, "Eat the red fruit and you will not die." And by the way, God lied because they didn't die, right? The serpent said, "Your eyes will be open." I believe their eyes were opened, and the apple or the mushroom connected them directly to divinity without the intermediary of God the Father. So Eve ate the apple and came into her full, independent, erotic self and heart. And then, because women are the way we are, she generously shared it with Adam, offered the transformation to him, and immediately punishment, shame, guilt, oppression descended upon them. They were expelled and have been wandering inside us and outside us, trying to remember ever since. Eve was cast out as she opened the door to the deeper knowing, and we must all be okay outside the Father's garden, outside his house, outside the world of disembodied intelligence. We must all be visionary nomads, exiled from the hierarchy and ready to find each other and create the new world, which is really just remembering the world from which we came. Eve ate the apple to remember the time before our souls were militarized and straitjacketed by religions that rendered us defeated, guilty, sinful, waiting for someone or something, usually a father god or consumer god, coming to rescue us or redeem us or protect us, when in fact there was anything to be rescued from except those in our name who were committing wars and violence protecting us. Eve, who knew we didn't need a soldier or paradise or mythic corporate daddy who has occupied our imagination or our days into passive projects of waiting, while those who use his name pillage and hoard the goods. Eve, who knew paradise didn't need to be carried in on a white horse or descend in a lumen cloud, because in fact, paradise was already here. And our project, rather than waiting for paradise to be delivered, was instead to develop the capacity, desire, and vision to recognize and appreciate the paradise that is already here. The paradise not constructed on hierarchy and competition and domination and greed, but on connection and mutual cooperation. The paradise that grew from the earth herself, delivering every single thing that humans needed and beyond anything we could have ever dreamed of. And God and Adam and Eve, what did they say? They will have dominion over the earth. You will go and subdue her and multiply. Eve knew in her body memory was the greatest misconception, and violation would send the story of the world exactly where it has gone, to dominate and occupy and subdue our mother, our earth, who is not only feeding us, but who is in fact us. May I remind us that Eve did not ask either Adam or God for permission to eat the apple. She knew what she had to do, and I believe she must have known at least instinctively what would probably follow. She knew she risked their disapproval, and somewhere she must have known her legacy, legitimacy, and name could be ruined, and she could be expelled from the comforting mirage and garden of patriarchy. But it didn't stop her. She was our first whistleblower, knowing she was in the wrong garden. She ate the apple, chewed and swallowed it into her body, absorbed it into her bloodstream like a kind of medicine, like a kind of potion, a sweet red flesh ball of remembering. She ate the apple because her hunger for justice, for ecstasy, connection, pleasure, equality, and love was massively alive in her. Her hunger for connection to the erotic. And I really believe that Eve is alive in us today. Her hunger for her memories, she is our mother body, and we are on the brink of that remembering, which is why this pushback is so gigantic from the patriarchy. So how do we remember? What will jigger the flashbacks, images, and sensations? First, we have to unashamedly and openly eat the apple. And that involves ingesting all that catalyzes and provokes vision and imagination. It means educating ourselves and looking deeper into the stories and myths designed and sustained by the powers that be. Reintroducing ritual and poetry and time and human connectedness and plant medicines, opening the box, learning the data, touching the mystical, coming out of denial, coming into our bodies through touch and dance and sex, and trusting what we know and not asking permission, defying authority. It means trusting our methods of remembering. I want to just take a minute to just talk about 1 Billion Rising And just to say how honored and thrilled I was to dance today with all the members of this community, and thank you so much for doing it for the last 10 years. But it's really incredible to think, as I said earlier, that 1 billion women have been abused on this planet. And almost 13 years ago, when we invited the women of the world and all the men who loved them to rise and dance, it was really extraordinary what happened. Survivors and activists immediately responded in the first year, and over 200 countries and millions of people rose up and danced. But there were the skeptics, particularly in the media and corporatized institutions who kept asking. I was on this show in Britain called Hard Talk, okay? And the newscaster said to me, "So tell me, Miss Ensler, what does dancing do?" And I just started laughing. And I said, what doesn't it do? What doesn't dancing do, right? It's the greatest thing in the whole world. It's, I wanted to say, it's as if the ramblings and operations of their so-called empirically based empire had delivered us another world other than this one on the brink of human extinction. There is so much power in dancing. The power of state and domestic traumatized bodies collectively releasing and expanding and joining and resisting. Dancing invited women and men to reclaim and re-energize public space, spun and splashed creative and compassionate and determined energy in every direction. It made violence against women a front-page issue, allowed for autonomy and local organizing and global solidarity. It evoked demands for justice across a swath of intersectional issues, understanding that violence towards women cannot be separated from all the other violences, whether it be economic, environmental, racial, gender. It escalated ecstatic revolt. It's now 2025, and what we thought would be a one-year campaign has become 13 years and going, and this year we had 1,500 risings in hundreds of countries rising against fascism. We are stuck in the patriarchal, contaminated, capitalist, devastated garden, obeying the corporate daddy god, still living as if he has our interests at heart. I think of all those people in America who voted for Trump, believing he actually cared about them. It's living in a so-called paradise without reflection or awareness, in a somnolent state, seductive consumerism, near totalitarian surveillance, a corporately owned media, celebrity void culture, internet voyeurism, bullying is real, keeping us safe. Eve knew all of this was a mirage. She craved the real garden, the original garden, before the Father God implanted his hierarchy and the violence and the threat of punishment needed to sustain it. So how do we build movements that are grown from loving life, fighting for life, love, pleasure, joy? How do we make radical, outrageous, pushing the edge art and music that mainlines our thinking and passions into the masses? How do we keep evolving and surprising and deepening, getting closer and closer to the root, which is what radical means? How do we shut up and serve? Be more concerned with expanding than branding, be present for our allies without dominating them, find resources for those without access to resources, without controlling how they use them. Eve was a radical, and I love that word radical because it means going to the root, to the core. This is the time for radical change. This is the time to come into our bodies and dance and drum and rise. This is the time to stop apologizing for our belief in a world where everyone gets fed and taken care of, where we leave the rest of the oil in the ground, where those that do the hardest work are honored and paid the most, where we take our direction and inspiration from the most marginalized and invisible, where we trust our imagination that once lined up in the direction of life will begin to create something astounding, where we transform human suffering not by incarcerating people, policing punishment and degradation, but investigation into root causes, where we stop celebrating royalty with money and fame as our models, but instead honor and highlight those who humbly and without resources have transformed their communities, where we trust the mystical, emotional, and erotic as much as we trust the intellectual, political, and we understand that their integration is not only the catalyst for revolution, but in fact may be the revolution itself, where we come to know that humility is the path to revolution and service is the only song. This is the time to come out of our silos, our movement ghettos, and understand that each struggle for justice is a piece of the whole struggle. And rather than being cauterized and divided by hunger for resources and the spotlight, we must give up dominion and fiercely and joyfully embrace the interconnectedness of every one of those things. There is no hierarchy of suffering, only the joining in a single river of outrage, compassion, and revolt. This is the time to remake the structure, to reclaim the original garden. And remember, the tree of life, the offering of apples and mushrooms, was there inside the patriarchal garden. It's always been within us. In the end, it's about people, respect, love, honoring, cherishing, valuing life and people and our mother. We are Eve's children, daughter of our Black African mother, Eve, revolutionary Eve, who ate the apple that unearthed the first garden, the imposed and constructed garden. Eve, who ate the apple as her hunger for truth was our actual path, and now we must fulfill her legacy. Eve, mother of our freedom, ate the apple to liberate us into the world, our world. Now is the time to go deep inside to find a braver, more generous, more outraged, more enlightened part of ourselves to meet this moment. There's no time for cowering or capitulating, making deals with the devil, believing you'll be saved. We all know how that turns out. The people of the earth must gather and rise and refuse the corporates and the fascists and the oligarchs and the billionaires who aim to take it all, to starve us and divide us and make our lives a misery. Now's the time for all women to refuse to go back, to refuse to be less, to refuse to be objects, to refuse the violence that threatens our existence, but instead to step into our deeper wisdom, wildness, connection to the earth, and the daunting power of our sexuality, to become the unapologetic witches we were born to be. Eat the fucking apple. I want to close with a section from my memoir, In the Body of the World, and I'm going to do it tonight for my dear sister, Nathalie, and I just have so much appreciation for you and your thought and how you've brought all of us together in this wonderful conference. We are the people of the second wind. We who have been undermined, reduced, and minimized, we know who we are. Let us be taken. Let us turn our pain to power, our victimhood to fire, our self-hatred to action, our self-obsession to service, to fire, to wind, 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 be as transparent as wind, be as possible and relentless and dangerous, be that which moves things forward without needing to leave a mark, be part of this collection of molecules that begins somewhere unknown, but can't help but keep rising, rising, rising. Thank you all so much.